For 7 years, she had played the perfect society wife, hosting impeccable gatherings at her Newport mansion. But beneath the designer gown and expertly applied makeup, a secret smoldered, one that could shatter her world of privilege. As the Easter feast reached its climax, Derek's wine-spiked tongue threatened to unravel everything. "You know," he announced to the assembled guests, "there's something I've never told you all about my lovely wife." Claire's hand tightened on her fork, her heart racing. In that moment, she knew her two worlds were about to collide. What would happen when the truth came out? It would be hard to imagine being in her position. The crystal chandelier cast prismatic shadows across the marble countertop as Claire Thompson methodically arranged Easter lily centerpieces. Each pristine white bloom represented another piece of the facade she'd carefully constructed over the past 7 years. Their Newport mansion, with its sweeping views of the Atlantic, was ready to host yet another flawless social gathering. Claire's fingers brushed against a soft petal, and she inhaled the lily's sweet fragrance. For a moment, she was transported back to her childhood in Montana, where wildflowers dotted the prairies. The scent of lilies had always reminded her of her mother's perfume, a bittersweet memory that threatened to crack her carefully maintained composure. "The Prescotts confirmed for tomorrow," Derek announced, striding into the kitchen in his Brooks Brothers suit, barely glancing up from his phone. The sharp tap of his Italian leather shoes on the hardwood floor jolted Claire back to the present. "Richard's bringing that '82 Bordeaux he's been bragging about." Claire nodded, adjusting a lily's position by mere millimeters. "I've asked Maria to prepare the duck confit he likes." She kept her voice steady, masking the anxiety that always preceded these high-stakes dinner parties. "Just make sure she doesn't repeat last month's disaster with the sauce." Derek's voice carried that familiar edge of condescension. "We can't have anything less than perfect when half of Boston's financial elite is dining at our table." 7 years of marriage had taught Claire to recognize the warning signs in Derek's tone. His need for perfection had grown alongside his hedge fund's success, as if each zero in his bank account added another layer of expectation to their lives. She felt the weight of those expectations pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to suffocate her beneath the veneer of the perfect society wife. She caught her reflection in the kitchen's window, designer dress hugging her slim figure, perfectly coiffed hair, expertly applied makeup. Sometimes she barely recognized herself, this polished society wife who'd replaced the girl from Montana. The spring sunset painted the sky in shades of amber, reminding her of different sunsets over prairie grass. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember the feeling of wind in her hair as she ran through those fields, unburdened by the golden chains of wealth and status. "Claire?" Derek's sharp tone snapped her back to attention. "Are you listening? The Prescott's daughter just made partner at Goldman. We need to seat her next to Madison." "Of course," Claire murmured, reaching for her tablet to adjust the seating chart. As she moved names around on the screen, her hand brushed against the small gold locket beneath her silk blouse, her only remaining connection to her previous life. Inside, a tiny photo of her mother smiled up at her, a reminder of the woman who had sacrificed everything to give Claire a chance at a better life. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the mansion. "That'll be the florist with the additional arrangements," Claire said, grateful for the distraction. "Why, I'll handle it." As she walked through the grand foyer, each step on the marble floor felt like another step away from her true self. She opened the heavy oak door to find a young woman struggling with an enormous arrangement of peonies and roses. "Let me help you with that," Claire offered, taking some of the weight. The florist's eyes widened, clearly not expecting the lady of the house to assist. As they worked together to bring the flowers inside, Claire felt a pang of longing for the days when manual labor was a part of her daily life. "These are beautiful," Claire commented, inhaling the mixed floral scent. "You have a real talent?" The florist blushed, Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. It's not often I get to work with such exquisite blooms. For a moment, Claire saw herself in the young woman's earnest face and hard-working demeanor. She felt an overwhelming urge to tell her to cherish her freedom, to never let anyone dim her spirit. Instead, she simply smiled and thanked her for her work. As the florist left, Claire turned to face the imposing staircase that led to the upper floors of the mansion. Family portraits lined the walls, Derek's ancestors looking down with stern expressions, judging every move she made. Claire's own family was notably absent from this gallery of wealth and privilege. She climbed the stairs, each step heavy with the weight of her secrets. In the master bedroom, she locked the door behind her and went to her private safe, hidden behind a painting of the Newport coastline. With trembling fingers, she entered the combination and retrieved a stack of documents. Spreadsheets detailing discrete fund transfers, blueprints for medical clinics in underserved areas, and correspondence with doctors willing to work in rural communities. This was Claire's true life's work, hidden from the prying eyes of Newport society and her own husband. As she reviewed the latest reports from the Desert Hope Initiative, her secret network of free clinics across the Southwest, Claire felt a surge of pride and purpose. This was why she endured the suffocating world of high society. Every perfectly planned dinner party, every vapid conversation about stock portfolios and vacation homes was a means to an end. She was Robin Hood in Louboutins, redirecting the wealth of the privileged few to help those truly in need. A knock at the door startled her. "Claire, are you in there?" Derek's voice came through the wood, impatient and slightly irritated. Quickly, Claire returned the documents to the safe and smoothed her dress. "Just a moment," she called, taking a deep breath to compose herself. She opened the door to find Derek standing there, his brow furrowed. "What's taking so long?" "We have the seating arrangements to finalize, and the wine pairings need to be double-checked." Claire nodded, slipping back into her role as the perfect hostess. "I was just freshening up. Shall we go over everything in your study?" As they walked down the hallway, Claire's hand instinctively went to the locket around her neck. In her mind, she could hear her mother's voice. "Stay true to yourself, no matter what life throws at you." It was a daily struggle to honor that advice while navigating the treacherous waters of wealth and privilege. In Derek's study, with its dark wood paneling and leather-bound books, Claire felt the familiar sense of being an imposter in her own life. As they pored over guest lists and menu options, she allowed her mind to wander to the lives she was quietly changing. Through her secret philanthropy, it was in those moments, thinking of the families who would receive quality health care because of her efforts, that Claire found the strength to maintain her elaborate charade. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed, its deep tones a reminder of the passing time and the life Claire had left behind. She looked at Derek, engrossed in his tablet, and wondered if he had any idea of the double life she was leading. As the sun set over the Atlantic, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, Claire steeled herself for another evening of playing the perfect society wife, all while dreaming of the day she could fully dedicate herself to making a real difference in the world. 15 years earlier, the Montana sky stretched endless and blue above Claire Mitchell's head as she rushed between the diner and her mother's medical appointments. The aroma of coffee and hash browns clung to her uniform as she counted tips during her break, the worn bills feeling like lifelines in her calloused hands. The small town of Whitefish bustled with its usual mix of locals and tourists, the latter drawn by the promise of pristine wilderness and world-class skiing. But for Claire, the picturesque surroundings were overshadowed by the constant worry about making ends meet. She glanced at her watch, a cheap digital model with a cracked face, and quickened her pace. The medical center loomed ahead, its sterile white exterior a stark contrast to the rugged beauty of the surrounding mountains. "Claire, honey," her mother called weakly from the passenger seat of their aging Subaru. Ellen Mitchell's once vibrant, Red hair had thinned, and her skin had taken on a sallow hue that makeup couldn't quite disguise. "You don't have to come to every appointment. Your shift—" "I've got it covered, Mom," Claire interrupted, forcing brightness into her voice as she helped her mother out of the car. "Mrs. Henderson's happy to let me make up the hours on Sunday." The truth was more complicated. Between waitressing at the diner, tutoring high school students, and weekend shifts at the local pharmacy, Claire was barely keeping her head above water. But her mother didn't need to know that. The cancer was eating away at more than just her body. Their savings had vanished months ago, leaving behind a mountain of medical bills that seemed to grow with each passing day. In the oncologist's waiting room, Claire pulled out her worn copy of Gray's Anatomy, studying between glances at her mother's gaunt face. The book's pages were dog-eared and covered in highlighter marks and cramped notes in the margins, testament to Claire's determination to learn everything she could about the human body and the diseases that plagued it. Her Yale acceptance letter, creased and precious, served as a bookmark. Full tuition would be covered by scholarships and grants, but the living expenses loomed large in Claire's mind. She had already deferred for a year to care for her mother, and the thought of leaving her behind to pursue her dreams filled Claire with a potent mixture of guilt and longing. "Mitchell?" the nurse called, and Claire helped her mother stand, supporting her increasingly frail frame. As they followed the nurse down the sterile hallway, Claire caught sight of their reflection in a window. Mother and daughter with the same determined set to their jaws, the same quiet dignity in their bearing. It was a stark reminder of how much things had changed in the past year and how much further they had to go. The oncologist's office was a familiar space now, with its diplomas on the wall and the ever-present scent of antiseptic. Dr. Reeves, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted them with a warm but professional smile. "Ellen, Claire, good to see you both," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "How have you been feeling, Ellen?" As her mother detailed the past week's worth of symptoms, increased fatigue, loss of appetite, persistent pain, Claire found herself studying Dr. Reeves. She noted the compassionate way the doctor listened, how she managed to convey both empathy and professional detachment. It was a skill Claire hoped to emulate one day, assuming she could find a way to make her medical school dreams a reality. "I'd like to adjust your medication regimen," Dr. Reeves said, scribbling on a prescription pad, "and I think it's time we discuss the possibility of hospice care." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Claire felt her mother's hand tighten around hers, a silent plea for strength. Is it really time for that?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Reeves met her gaze steadily. "It's not giving up, Claire. It's about ensuring the best quality of life for your mother in the time she has left." The drive home was silent, the majestic Rockies seeming to mock their pain with their enduring beauty. Claire's mind raced, trying to calculate how she could possibly manage hospice care on top of everything else. As they pulled into the driveway of their small ranch house, Ellen turned to her daughter. "Claire, I want you to promise me something." Claire killed the engine, the old Subaru shuddering to a stop. "Anything, Mom. Promise me you'll go to Yale, that you won't let all of this," she gestured vaguely at herself, "hold you back from your dreams." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes. "Mom, I can't just leave you. We'll figure something out. Maybe I can take online classes or—" Ellen shook her head, a spark of her old determination flaring in her eyes. "Oh, no, sweetheart. You've put your life on hold long enough. I won't have you sacrificing your future for me." That night, after helping her mother to bed, Claire sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and financial aid forms. The house creaked and settled around her, full of memories of happier times, her father's laughter before the accident that took him too soon, family dinners that didn't revolve around medication schedules. She pulled out her Yale acceptance letter, running her fingers over the embossed logo. It represented everything she had worked for, everything her parents had sacrificed to give her a chance at. The idea of leaving her mother behind felt like a betrayal, but the thought of disappointing her by not going was equally unbearable. A soft knock at the back door startled her. She opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, her boss from the diner, holding a covered dish. "Thought you girls could use a home-cooked meal," the older woman said, pressing the warm container into Claire's hands. "How's your mama doing?" Claire felt her composure crack. "They want to start hospice care," she said, her voice breaking. Mrs. Henderson enveloped her in a hug that smelled of coffee and pie crust. "Oh, honey, you've been so strong for so long. It's okay to let it out sometimes." And there, in the dimly lit kitchen with the scent of homemade casserole filling the air, Claire allowed herself to cry for the first time in months. She cried for her mother's pain, for the unfairness of it all, for the dreams that seemed to be slipping away with each passing day. As Mrs. Henderson held her, murmuring words of comfort, Claire felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in her chest. This small town had rallied around them in ways both big and small. Casseroles and carpools, fundraisers and prayer circles. Oh, it wasn't enough to solve all their problems, but it was a reminder that they weren't facing this alone. When the tears finally subsided, Claire wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Mrs. Henderson patted her cheek gently. "You're going to do great things, Claire Mitchell. Don't you ever forget that." As she closed the door behind her boss, Claire's gaze fell on the pile of paperwork on the table. With renewed determination, she sat down and began to work. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to honor both her mother's wishes and her own dreams. The path ahead was uncertain, but Claire was determined to face it head-on, just as the strong Montana women before her had always done. The library at Yale Medical School was quiet at 3 a.m., save for the soft clicking of Claire's laptop keys and the occasional rustle of turning pages. The scent of old books mingled with the faint aroma of stale coffee, creating an atmosphere that had become all too familiar over the past 2 years. Claire rubbed her tired eyes, glancing at the clock on her phone. She'd perfected the art of existing on 4 hours of sleep, splitting her time between classes, her work-study position at the hospital, weekend shifts at a New Haven diner, and online tutoring sessions. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under her eyes, a testament to her relentless schedule. Her phone vibrated, a text from the hospice nurse back in Montana. Her mother's condition was stable, but the unspoken truth hung heavy in every message. Time was running out. Claire's heart clenched, the familiar mix of guilt and determination washing over her. She was here, pursuing her dreams, while her mother fought her final battle thousands of miles away. Pushing aside the emotion threatening to overwhelm, Claire refocused on her laptop screen. The research paper on healthcare accessibility in rural communities was more than just an assignment. It was a mission. Every statistic, every case study, reminded her of the struggles her family and neighbors had faced back in Whitefish. "You're here late again," Dr. Sarah Chen commented, setting a cup of coffee beside Claire's textbooks. The young professor had become something of a mentor, recognizing in Claire the same drive that had propelled her own journey from a small Chinese village to an Ivy League faculty position. Claire gratefully accepted the coffee, inhaling its rich aroma. "Just finishing this research paper. Did you know that over 40% of Americans in rural areas delay medical treatment due to cost?" Dr. Chen pulled up a chair, her interest piqued. "That's a staggering number, but you're not just writing about this academically, are you?" Claire's fingers traced the worn edges of her mother's latest medical bills, which she kept as a constant reminder of her purpose. "Someone needs to fix this broken system," she said quietly. "Why not me?" Dr. Chen studied her thoughtfully, taking in the determination in Claire's eyes and the tension in her shoulders. You carry a heavy burden, Claire, but I believe you have the strength to bear it and to make real change." Their conversation was interrupted by the buzz of Claire's phone. Another text from Montana, this one more urgent. Her mother's condition had taken a turn for the worse. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Claire read the message. Dr. Chen, sensing the shift, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Go," she said simply. "Family comes first. We'll sort out your assignments when you return." The next few hours passed in a blur of hasty packing and frantic travel arrangements. As Claire boarded the plane to Montana, her mind raced with unfinished assignments, missed shifts, and the looming specter of falling behind. But beneath it all was a current of fear that she might be too late. The flight seemed interminable, each minute stretching into an eternity. Claire stared out the window at the patchwork landscape below, her mother's voice echoing in her memory. "Sometimes, baby, the hardest road leads to exactly where you're meant to be." When she finally arrived at the hospice center in Whitefish, the sun was just beginning to paint the mountains with streaks of gold and pink. The quiet efficiency of the nurses and the antiseptic smell of the hallways brought back memories of countless hospital visits over the years. Her mother lay in a bed by the window, looking small and frail against the white sheets. But when she opened her eyes and saw Claire, her face lit up with a smile that erased years of pain and worry. "You came," Ellen whispered, reaching out a thin hand. Claire took it, fighting back tears. "Of course I came. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." Ellen shook her head weakly. "No apologies. You're exactly where you were supposed to be." She patted the bed, indicating for Claire to sit. "Or tell me about Yale, about your dreams." And so, as the sun rose over the Montana wilderness, Claire talked. She spoke of her classes, her research, her plans to revolutionize rural healthcare. Ellen listened with shining eyes, occasionally asking questions or offering words of encouragement. As the morning wore on, Ellen's energy began to fade. But before she drifted off to sleep, she fixed Claire with a look of fierce pride. "You're going to change the world, my brave girl. Don't ever forget where you came from, but don't let it hold you back either." Claire stayed by her mother's side for the next 3 days, sleeping in a chair and existing on vending machine snacks and lukewarm coffee. She read aloud from her medical textbooks, sharing her knowledge as if it could somehow stave off the inevitable. On the 4th day, as a gentle snow began to fall outside the window, Ellen Mitchell took her last breath. Claire held her hand, whispering words of love and gratitude until the very end. The days that followed were a haze of funeral arrangements and condolence casseroles. The small town rallied around Claire, offering support in ways both big and small. Mrs. Henderson from the diner organized meals. Claire's high school teachers helped sort through paperwork. Even Dr. Reeves, her mother's oncologist, stopped by to offer her condolences and a letter of recommendation for Claire's medical school applications. As Claire stood in the cemetery, watching as her mother's casket was lowered into the ground next to her father's, she felt a profound sense of both loss and purpose. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above her, a reminder of the vastness of her dreams and the challenges that lay ahead. Later that evening, as she packed up her childhood home, Claire came across a small box hidden in her mother's closet. Inside, she found a collection of newspaper clippings. Every article mentioning Claire's academic achievements, from elementary school spelling bees to her Yale acceptance. Beneath them was a letter, addressed to Claire in her mother's handwriting. With trembling hands, Claire opened it. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. But please know that I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Your determination, your compassion, your brilliance. These are the qualities that will change the world. I know the road ahead won't be easy, There will be times when you'll want to give up, when the weight of your dreams feels too heavy to bear. In those moments, remember where you come from. Remember the strength of the Montana women who came before you, and remember that I am always with you, cheering you on. You have the power to heal not just bodies, but entire communities. Never lose sight of that purpose. All my love, always, Mom. Tears streamed down Claire's face as she clutched the letter to her chest. In that moment, surrounded by the remnants of her past and standing on the threshold of her future, Claire made a silent vow. She would honor her mother's memory not just by succeeding, but by using that success to help others. The path ahead was daunting, but Claire Mitchell was ready to face it head-on. The scorching Arizona sun beat down on Claire's rental car as she pulled up to what would become her first free clinic. The abandoned strip mall in Phoenix's outskirts wasn't much to look at, with its sun-bleached paint and empty windows staring blankly at the dusty parking lot. But where others saw decay, Claire saw potential. She stepped out of the car, the heat immediately enveloping her like a heavy blanket. The air smelled of creosote and hot asphalt, a far cry from the crisp mountain air of her Montana youth, or the manicured lawns of New Haven. Claire took a deep breath, tasting dust and possibility on her tongue. "You sure about this location, Dr. Thompson?" asked Michael Rivera, the local contractor she'd hired. He wiped sweat from his brow with a bandana, squinting at the building. "This neighborhood's seen better days." Claire nodded, already envisioning the transformation. "Id they? That's exactly why it's perfect," she replied, her voice firm with conviction. "This is where we're needed most." She'd spent 2 years quietly channeling her portion of Derek's wealth into this project, carefully constructing a paper trail that even her detail-oriented husband wouldn't think to investigate. The Desert Hope Initiative was taking shape, one clinic at a time. New Mexico, Nevada, and now Arizona. Each location strategically chosen to serve communities forgotten by the healthcare system. As Michael began outlining the renovation plans, Claire's mind wandered to the double life she'd been leading. In Newport, she was the perfect society wife, hosting charity, galas, and attending yacht parties. But here, in the unforgiving heat of the Southwest, she was Dr. Claire Thompson, founder of a growing network of free clinics. The sound of children's laughter drew her attention. Across the street, a group of kids was playing in the spray of a fire hydrant, their joy a stark contrast to the rundown surroundings. Claire watched them, reminded of why she'd embarked on this secret mission. Those children deserved the same access to health care as the privileged elite she rubbed shoulders with back east. "Dr. Thompson?" Michael's voice snapped her back. "To the present. We should head inside to check the electrical." The interior of the abandoned store was a mess of dust and debris. Sunlight filtered through grimy windows, illuminating the potential Claire saw beneath the neglect. In her mind's eye, she could already see the reception area, exam rooms, and community space that would soon occupy this empty shell. As they walked through the building, Claire's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Derek. "The Ashworths are hosting a yacht party next weekend. Wear the new Valentino." The two worlds collided jarringly in Claire's mind. She quickly typed a response, promising to be there, before turning her attention back to Michael's questions about medical equipment placement. Later that evening, in her modest hotel room, Claire video-called Derek. The contrast between her surroundings and the opulent backdrop of their Newport mansion was stark. "The medical conference is going well," she said, the practiced lie smooth on her tongue. "Dr. Chen's presentation on rural healthcare was particularly interesting." Derek nodded absently, his attention clearly elsewhere. "Fascinating, I'm sure," he replied dismissively. "Listen, darling, don't forget about the Ashworths' party. It's important we make an appearance." As soon as the call ended, Claire felt the familiar weight of her deception settling on her shoulders. She opened her laptop, losing herself in the financial projections and staffing plans for the Phoenix Clinic. This was her real work, her true purpose. A knock at the door startled her. "Room service," a voice called out. Claire opened the door to find a young woman with a food tray. As she set it down, Claire noticed the dark circles under her eyes, and the way she winced slightly when bending over. "Are you all right?" Claire asked, her doctor's instincts kicking in. The woman, Maria, according to her name tag, straightened up, a forced smile on her face. "I'm fine, ma'am. Just a little back pain." "How long have you been experiencing it?" Claire pressed gently. Maria hesitated, then sighed. "A few months, but I can't afford to see a doctor, and I can't risk losing this job." In that moment, Claire saw the embodiment of everything she was fighting for. There's a free clinic opening up not far from here soon," she said, scribbling the address on a notepad. "Promise me you'll go get checked out." Maria took the paper, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Thank you, ma'am. I will." After Maria left, Claire stood by the window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline. The city lights twinkled against the dark desert sky, each one representing a life, a family, a story. How many Marias were out there, suffering in silence because they couldn't afford proper health care? She thought of her mother, of the struggles they'd faced in Montana, of the countless families she'd seen during her residency, forced to choose between medical care and putting food on the table. The memory of her mother's final days in hospice care, surrounded by compassionate professionals who eased her pain and preserved her dignity, fueled Claire's determination. Claire returned to her laptop, throwing herself into the work with renewed vigor. She refined budgets, tweaked staffing plans, and reached out to her network of like-minded doctors willing to volunteer their time. As the night deepened, she felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life in Newport. Just before dawn, Claire stepped out onto the small balcony of her hotel room. The air was cool, a brief respite before the punishing heat of the day. In the distance, she could see the silhouette of Camelback Mountain against the lightening sky. She thought of Derek, probably still asleep in their king-sized bed back in Newport. She thought of the life she led there, the endless social obligations, the carefully maintained image, the hollow pursuit of status and wealth. It was a gilded cage, and one she was finding increasingly difficult to inhabit. As the first rays of sunlight began to paint the desert landscape in shades of gold and pink, Claire made a decision. She couldn't continue living this double life indefinitely. Sooner or later, her two worlds would collide. The thought was terrifying, but also strangely liberating. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Michael. "Let's push up the timeline on the clinic. I want to open doors in 2 months." Then, taking a deep breath, she dialed Derek's number. It was time to start laying the groundwork for the truth. She couldn't reveal everything just yet, but she could begin to plant the seeds of change. Derek? Sorry to wake you. I've been thinking, when I get back, I'd like to talk about getting more involved in your philanthropic work. I have some ideas about healthcare initiatives we could support." As she spoke, Claire watched the sun rise over Phoenix, ushering in a new day filled with challenges and possibilities. The desert stretched out before her, vast and unforgiving, but also brimming with hidden life and potential. Much like the journey ahead, it would be difficult, but infinitely rewarding. Claire ended the call with a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer content to simply play a role. It was time to bridge her two worlds and work towards creating real, lasting change. As she prepared for another day of clinic planning, Claire felt more alive than she had in years. The desert wind whispered of new beginnings and the promise of lives transformed. The Easter Sunday sun streamed through the mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the meticulously polished marble floors. Claire moved through the crowd with practiced grace. champagne flute in hand, orchestrating the sophisticated chaos of a high society gathering. The air was thick with the mingled scents of expensive perfumes, freshly cut flowers, and the tantalizing aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvres. As she navigated the sea of designer labels and subtle perfumes, Claire felt the weight of her double life more acutely than ever. Just days ago, she had been in Arizona, overseeing the final preparations for the Phoenix Clinic's opening. Now, here she was, playing the role of the perfect hostess in a world that felt increasingly foreign. To her, Claire darling, Madison Whitmore, Derek's sister, air-kissed her cheeks. The investigative reporter's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. That exposé I've been working on about healthcare inequality is finally going to print. You must read it. Claire's heart skipped a beat. That sounds fascinating, Madison. I'd love to hear more about it later. Before Madison could respond, Derek's voice carried across the room. Everyone, please find your seats. The chef has outdone herself this year. The dining room gleamed with silver and crystal, each place setting a testament to precision and opulence. Claire noticed Richard Prescott examining his wine with approval, while his daughter Jennifer engaged Derek in an animated discussion about market trends. The scene was so familiar, yet Claire felt like an outsider looking in, acutely aware of the vast gulf between this world and the one she had created with the Desert Hope Initiative. As the first course was served, a delicate asparagus soup with truffle oil, Claire found her mind wandering to the clinic in Phoenix. Today was supposed to be their soft opening, a chance to provide basic health screenings to the local community. She had entrusted Dr. Ramirez, a dedicated physician she'd recruited from a busy urban hospital, to oversee the proceedings. The guilt of not being there gnawed at her. Claire? Derek's sharp tone snapped her back to attention. Richard was just asking about your involvement in the Thompson Family Foundation. Perhaps you'd like to share some of your recent ideas. She met Derek's gaze, noting the subtle challenge in his eyes. Since her call from Phoenix, he had been both intrigued and slightly suspicious of her sudden interest in their philanthropic efforts. Of course, Claire said, straightening in her chair. I've been researching healthcare initiatives in underserved communities. There's a staggering need for accessible medical care, particularly in rural areas and urban food deserts. As she spoke, Claire felt a shift in the room's energy. Some guests leaned in, genuinely interested, while others poorly disguised their boredom. Richard Prescott, however, was nodding thoughtfully. It's a worthy cause, he said. In fact, some of our company's operations are in areas that could benefit from such programs. Perhaps we should discuss this further. Derek? Derek's expression was unreadable as he nodded. We'll set something up after the holidays. The conversation moved on, but Claire could feel Madison's keen gaze on her. The investigative reporter and her sister-in-law had clearly sensed something beneath the surface of Claire's newfound passion. As the meal progressed through its carefully choreographed courses, Claire found herself increasingly distracted. Between bites of duck confit and sips of exquisite wine, she was mentally calculating supply needs for the Phoenix Clinic and planning outreach programs for the surrounding community. It happened during the second course. You know, Derek announced, his voice carrying that peculiar tone he adopted when he'd had too much wine. I don't believe I've ever told you all how I met my lovely wife. Claire's hand tightened around her fork. This wasn't part of their carefully maintained narrative. Derek, she said quietly, a warning in her tone. She was waiting tables, he continued, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Can you imagine? A waitress in New Haven. I thought she was a Yale student slumming it, but no. She was working 3 jobs just to survive. The room grew silent. Madison's investigative reporter instincts visibly kicked in as she leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. Claire felt a flush creeping up her neck, but she refused to be shamed. That's right, she said, her voice steady. I was putting myself through medical school. It taught me a lot about hard work and the struggles many people face to access education and healthcare. She met Derek's gaze, silently daring him to continue. For a moment, the tension between them was palpable. Richard Prescott cleared his throat. Well, it's admirable, really. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's the American dream, isn't it? The conversation awkwardly shifted, but Claire could feel the undercurrents of curiosity and judgment swirling around the table. She excused herself as soon as it was polite, retreating to the kitchen under the guise of checking on dessert. In the relative quiet of the kitchen, surrounded by the staff's efficient movements, Claire leaned against the cool marble countertop and took a deep breath. She fingered the small gold locket around her neck, her mother's last gift to her. What would Ellen Mitchell think of her daughter now, caught between two worlds, trying to bridge a gap that seemed to grow wider with each passing day? Aye? Everything all right, Mrs. Thompson? Maria, the head chef, asked quietly. Claire managed to smile. Yes, thank you, Maria. Just needed a moment. As she turned to leave, Claire caught sight of her reflection in the polished surface of a copper pot. The woman staring back at her was impeccably dressed, every hair in place, the very picture of a society wife. But in her eyes, Claire saw the determination of the girl from Montana, the passion of the medical student, and the fierce commitment of the secret philanthropist. She squared her shoulders and prepared to return to the dining room. Whatever Derek's game was, she wouldn't let him derail her mission. The Desert Hope Initiative was too important, the lives at stake too precious. As she walked back into the opulent dining room, Claire made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. She would find a way to bring her two worlds together, to use her position and resources to make a real difference. The path ahead would be challenging. But as she took her seat at the table, Claire felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. The dessert, an elaborate construction of chocolate and gold leaf, was served as conversations resumed their normal rhythms of stock prices and vacation homes. But beneath the surface, Claire knew that something had fundamentally changed. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack, and through those cracks, the real Claire Thompson, doctor, philanthropist, advocate, was emerging. As the evening wore on, Claire caught Madison's eye across the table. The reporter gave her a small nod, a gesture that spoke volumes. Claire realized that in Madison, she might find an unexpected ally in the journey ahead. The Easter gathering continued late into the night, a glittering affair of wealth and privilege. But for Claire, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. As she bid farewell to the last of the guests, the weight of her secret life felt simultaneously heavier and lighter. The time for hiding was coming to an end. The real work, the work of reconciling her two worlds and creating lasting change, was just beginning. The last echoes of polite laughter and clinking glasses faded as the final guests departed. Claire stood in the foyer, the forced smile she'd worn all evening finally slipping from her face. She kicked off her Louboutins, relishing the cool marble against her aching feet. "Quite an evening!" Madison's voice came from behind her. Claire turned to find her sister-in-law leaning against the doorframe, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Madison," Claire acknowledged, suddenly wary. The investigative reporter had been watching her closely all night, no doubt piecing together the inconsistencies in Claire's carefully constructed image. "Walk with me," Madison suggested, nodding towards the garden. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of saltwater and blooming flowers. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, as much for comfort as for warmth. They strolled in silence for a moment, the manicured paths crunching softly beneath their feet. Finally, Madison spoke. "Desert Hope Initiative," she said simply. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "I'm not sure what you mean," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Madison stopped, turning to face her sister-in-law. "Come on, Claire. I'm an investigative reporter. Did you really think I wouldn't dig deeper after your impassioned speech about healthcare inequality? For a moment, Claire considered, maintaining the lie. But the weight of her secret life suddenly felt unbearable. "How much do you know?" she asked quietly. "Enough," Madison replied. "A mysterious benefactor establishing free clinics across the Southwest. State-of-the-art facilities appearing in some of the most underserved communities in the country. It's you, isn't it? You're the one behind it all." Claire nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over her. "Yes," she admitted. "It's me." Madison's expression softened. "Why the secrecy? This is incredible work you're doing, Claire. You should be shouting it from the rooftops." Claire sighed, sinking onto a nearby stone bench. "It's complicated. Derek, he wouldn't understand. He sees our wealth as something to be protected, multiplied. The idea of giving it away like this." She trailed off, shaking her head. Madison sat beside her, her reporter's notebook forgotten as she took on the role of concerned sister-in-law. "Tell me everything," she urged gently. And so, there in the moonlit garden, with the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs, Claire unburdened herself. She spoke of her childhood in Montana, of watching her mother struggle to access adequate health care. She recounted her years at Yale, working multiple jobs to make ends meet while pursuing her medical degree. And finally, she revealed the full scope of the Desert Hope Initiative, the network of clinics. The lives changed, the communities transformed. As she talked, Claire felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For so long, she had carried this secret alone, navigating between two worlds without a confidant. Now, seeing the mixture of awe and admiration in Madison's eyes, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of pride in what she had accomplished. "Claire, it's remarkable," Madison said when she had finished. "But you can't keep living this double life. It's not sustainable." "I know," Claire admitted, "but I don't know how to bridge these two worlds. Derek, the society we're part of, they have such a narrow view of what our wealth should be used for." Madison was quiet for a moment, her journalist's mind clearly working through the implications. "Oh, what if," she said slowly, "we could change that view? What if we could use my platform, combined with your work, to shift the narrative around wealth and social responsibility?" Claire looked at her skeptically. "You really think that's possible?" "I think it's worth trying," Madison replied firmly. The exposé I'm working on, it's about the healthcare crisis in America. Your clinics, they're a solution to part of that crisis. If we could showcase the impact you're making." As they discussed possibilities, Claire felt a spark of hope igniting within her. Perhaps she didn't have to choose between her two worlds. Perhaps, with Madison's help, she could bring them together in a way that would create even greater change. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the gravel path. Derek appeared, his tie loosened, and a glass of scotch in his hand. "There you are," he said, his words slightly slurred. "What are you two conspiring about out here?" Madison stood, smoothly stepping into the role of protective sister. "Just girl talk, Derek. Nothing for you to worry about." Derek's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't press the issue. "Well, don't stay out too late. We have that brunch with the Ashworths tomorrow." As he walked back towards the house, Claire and Madison exchanged a look. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, Claire felt like she had a true ally in her mission. "We'll figure this out," Madison assured her, squeezing her hand. "Your work is too important to remain in the shadows." Claire nodded, feeling a mixture of trepidation and excitement. As they made their way back to the house, she found herself looking at it with new eyes. The mansion that had often felt like a gilded cage now seemed like a potential launching pad for real change. In the study, Derek was at his desk, already immersed in work despite the late hour. Claire paused in the doorway, struck by the contrast between his world of high finance and the lives she was working to improve through the Desert Hope initiative. "Derek?" she said softly. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I think we need to talk." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Ah, yes, I believe we do." As Claire stepped into the study, closing the door behind her, she felt as though she was standing on the precipice of a new chapter in her life. The carefully constructed facade was crumbling, but from its ruins, something more authentic and potentially more powerful could emerge. Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. A new day was dawning, both literally and figuratively. As Claire prepared to reveal her true self to her husband, she drew strength from the memory of the lives she'd touched through her work, from the support of her unexpected ally in Madison, and from the unwavering belief that had driven her. All along, that one person, acting with conviction and compassion, could indeed change the world. The conversation ahead would be difficult, the future uncertain. But as she met Derek's gaze across the polished expanse of his desk, Claire felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The time for hiding was over. The real work, the work of reconciling her two worlds and creating lasting change, was just beginning. The study was bathed in the warm glow of a Tiffany lamp, casting intricate patterns across the leather-bound books and polished wood surfaces. Claire stood before Derek's imposing mahogany desk, her heart pounding. The last of the Easter guests had long since departed, leaving an uneasy silence in their wake. Derek loosened his tie, pouring himself another glass of scotch. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, his eyes never leaving Claire's face. "So," he said, his voice low and controlled, but Claire could hear the undercurrent of anger. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I wanted to," she began, "but I didn't think you'd understand." Derek's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Understand what, exactly? That my wife has been lying to me for years. That you've been funneling millions into some misguided charity project." "Misguided?" Claire's voice sharpened, her own anger rising to meet his. "Those clinics have helped over 50,000 people, Derek. People who would have died without proper health care. And what about our reputation, our standing in society?" Derek's voice rose as he stood, towering over the desk. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" The word "us" hung in the air between them, a stark reminder of how far apart they'd grown. Claire felt a sudden, overwhelming sadness. This man, whom she had once loved, seemed like a stranger now. "Is that all you care about?" she asked quietly. "How it looks?" Derek ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Of course not. But we have responsibilities, Claire. Commitments. You can't just go off and play Mother Teresa without considering the consequences." "Consequences," Claire repeated, incredulous. "The only consequence I see is that people's lives are being saved. Families aren't being bankrupted by medical bills. Children are getting the care they need." She moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "Derek, don't you see? We have the power to make a real difference, to use our wealth for something meaningful." For a moment, something flickered in Derek's eyes, a hint of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. But it was quickly replaced by a hardness that made Claire's heart sink. "Hey, you had no right," he said, his voice cold. "No right to make these decisions without me, to risk everything we've built." "Everything we've built?" Claire echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her. "What have we built, Derek? A life of empty parties and superficial friendships. A mansion full of things we don't need while people suffer." She turned away, moving to the window. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It reminded her of the sunrises she'd witnessed in Arizona, standing on the site of what would become the Desert Hope Clinic. "I can't live like this anymore," she said softly, more to herself than to Derek. Behind her, she heard the clink of ice in a glass, the soft thud as Derek set his drink down. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but no less intense. "What are you saying, Claire?" She turned back to face him, drawing strength from the memory of the patients she'd helped, the lives she'd changed. "I'm saying that I won't stop. The Desert Hope Initiative is too important. If you can't support that, if you can't see the value in what I'm doing, then maybe we need to reevaluate our marriage." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Derek's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, hurt, and finally, a resigned sort of sadness. "You've changed," he said, almost accusingly. Claire nodded. "Yes, I have. Or maybe I've just remembered who I really am." As the sun continued to rise, casting long shadows across the study, Claire and Derek stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words and diverging paths pressing down on them. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect life had finally shattered, leaving them to navigate the jagged pieces of truth that remained. In the kitchen, Madison sat at the island, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard. The story was taking shape, not just of the Desert Hope Initiative, but of the woman behind it. She paused, weighing her loyalties against her journalistic instincts. The sound of raised voices from the study made her wince. She had known this confrontation was coming, had even encouraged Claire to be honest with Derek. But hearing the pain and anger in both their voices made her question whether she had done the right thing. Madison's phone buzzed. A message from her editor asking for an update on the healthcare expose. She stared at it, her finger hovering over the reply button. The story she had uncovered was bigger than she had initially realized. It wasn't just about healthcare inequality. It was about the power of individuals to create change, about the responsibility that came with wealth. But it was also about her family, about the brother who, for all his faults, had always supported her career, about the sister-in-law who had become more than just a society wife, who had become a friend and now an inspiration. Madison closed her laptop. Decision made. This story needed to be told, but not at the expense of those she loved. She would find a way to balance truth and compassion, to shed light on the important work being done without destroying the lives of those doing it. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, Madison made her way to the study. The voices inside had quieted, replaced by a heavy silence that spoke volumes. She knocked softly, then entered without waiting for a response. Claire and Derek stood on opposite sides of the room, the physical distance between them a reflection of their emotional separation. "I think," Madison said carefully, "that we all need to talk." Derek looked at her sharply. "You knew about this?" Madison nodded. "I found out tonight, and before you ask, no, I haven't written anything about it. Not yet." Claire's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. Derek's narrowed in suspicion. "What do you mean, not yet?" he demanded. Madison took a deep breath. "I mean that there's a story here, an important one, but how that story is told, that's up to us, all of us." She looked between Claire and Derek, seeing the hurt, the anger, but also the remnants of love that still connected them. What Claire has done with the Desert Hope Initiative is remarkable. It deserves to be recognized, but it's also part of a larger story about privilege, responsibility, and the power of individuals to create change. Derek sank into his chair, suddenly looking very tired. "And where do I fit into this story?" he asked, a hint of bitterness in his voice. Madison smiled slightly. "That's up to you, big brother. You have a choice to make. We all do. As the new day dawned fully, bathing the study in warm light, the three of them sat down to talk. The path forward was unclear, fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls. But as they began to discuss possibilities, to share perspectives and find common ground, a small seed of hope took root. The facade had crumbled, leaving the truth exposed. But from those ruins, something new and potentially beautiful could grow, if they were brave enough to nurture it. The next morning, Claire found herself walking along the private beach behind their mansion, the chilly Atlantic breeze cutting through her light sweater. The previous night's confrontation with Derek had left her emotionally drained but strangely liberated. The weight of her secret, carried for so long, had finally been lifted. She breathed in the salty air, letting the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore calm her racing thoughts. The sand was cool beneath her bare feet, still damp from the receding tide. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries a counterpoint to the ocean's constant murmur. Lost in thought, Claire almost didn't notice Derek approaching until she heard the crunch of his footsteps on the sand. She turned to see him walking towards her, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd had as sleepless a night as she had. "I couldn't sleep," he said by way of greeting, his voice hoarse. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the people you've helped." Claire nodded, waiting for him to continue. She watched as he picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his hands as if it might hold the answers he was seeking. "I called Richard Prescott this morning," Derek admitted, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Asked him about the healthcare situation in rural areas where his company operates. The numbers, they're worse than I imagined." A small wave lapped at their feet, and Claire found herself remembering a creek near her childhood home in Montana. The sound of water had always brought her peace, even in the most turbulent times. "It's not about numbers, Derek," she said softly. "It's about people. Real people with lives and dreams. Just like us." Derek was quiet for a long moment, watching the seagulls circle overhead. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful, tinged with a hint of regret. "I've spent so long chasing wealth, status, I forgot what it meant to actually make a difference." He turned to face her fully, and Claire was struck by the vulnerability in his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For last night. For a lot of things, really." Claire felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry too," she replied. I should have been honest with you from the beginning." They stood in silence for a while, the ocean whispering its timeless secrets around them. Claire thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the struggling girl in Montana to the Yale medical student to the society wife with a secret mission. Each version of herself had led her here, to this beach, to this conversation that could change everything. "So where do we go from here?" Derek asked, voicing the question that hung between them. Claire took a deep breath. "I can't give up the Desert Hope Initiative," she said firmly. "It's too important. But I'd like for you to be a part of it, to see for yourself the difference it's making." Derek nodded slowly. "I'd like that," he said. Then, with a hint of his old confidence, he added, "And I think I might be able to bring some valuable perspective to the table. There are ways we could optimize operations, expand reach." Despite everything, Claire felt a smile tugging at her lips. Some things about Derek would never change, and maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. As they turned to walk back towards the house, Claire caught sight of Madison standing on the back porch, a steaming mug in her hands. The reporter gave them a tentative wave, which they returned. "We should talk to her," Claire said. "Figure out how we want to handle the public side of this." Derek tensed slightly but nodded. "You're right. If this story is going to come out, we should be the ones controlling the narrative." As they approached the house, The smell of fresh coffee wafted towards them. Madison had set up a small breakfast on the patio. Pastries, fruit, and a carafe of coffee. "I thought we could all use some fuel," she said as they joined her, "especially if we're going to be strategizing." Over breakfast, the three of them began to outline a plan. Madison would write her exposé, but with the full cooperation of Claire and Derek. They would use it as a launching point to bring the work of the Desert Hope Initiative into the public eye. "We could host a gala," Derek suggested, his mind already working on the logistics. "Invite key players in the healthcare industry, potential donors, policymakers." Claire nodded, warming to the idea. "And we could arrange for some of the doctors and patients from the clinics to speak. Put faces to the statistics." As they talked, Claire felt a growing sense of excitement. This was more than just damage control. It was an opportunity to amplify the impact of her work, to challenge their peers to think differently about wealth and social responsibility. The sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning. Mist. Out on the water, a sailboat appeared on the horizon, its white sails billowing in the breeze. Claire watched it for a moment, struck by how it seemed to embody the sense of possibility she was feeling. "There's one more thing," she said, turning back to Derek and Madison. "I want to go public with my own story. My background, my mother's struggle, all of it." Derek's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Are you sure? Once it's out there?" Claire nodded firmly. "I'm sure. I'm tired of hiding who I am, where I came from. And I think it might inspire others, show them that anyone can make a difference, regardless of where they start." Madison reached out and squeezed her hand. "I think it's a great idea. Powerful." Derek was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay," he said. "If that's what you want, we'll support you." As they continued to plan, Claire felt a sense of peace settling over her. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be scrutiny, criticism, challenges to overcome. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was truly living authentically. The breeze picked up, carrying with it the promise of change. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sun warm her face. She thought of her mother, of the struggles they had faced together. "I hope I'm making you proud," she whispered. When she opened her eyes, she caught Derek watching her with a mixture of admiration and something that looked a lot like love. It wasn't the end of their journey. In many ways, it was just the beginning. But as they sat there, with the Atlantic stretching out before them and a new sense of purpose uniting them, Claire felt hope blossoming in her chest. The facade had crumbled, but from its ruins, something stronger and more beautiful was emerging. Together, they would write a new chapter, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of countless others who would benefit from their work. As the morning wore on, the whispers of the Atlantic seemed to carry a message of hope and renewal. Claire Thompson, doctor, philanthropist, and now openly a woman determined to change the world, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. 6 months after the fateful Easter dinner, the Thompson mansion was abuzz with activity, but of a very different kind. The formal dining room, once a stage for superficial social gatherings, had been transformed into a makeshift command. Center maps of the southwestern United States were spread across the antique table, dotted with colorful pins marking existing and potential clinic locations. Claire stood at the head of the table, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, a far cry from her former society wife image. She was deep in discussion with a diverse group of professionals, doctors, administrators, and financial experts. If we reallocate funds from the Newport Hospital Gala," Claire pointed to a spot on the map, her finger tracing a route through eastern New Mexico, "we could open another clinic here. The need in this area is critical." Derek nodded, making notes on his tablet. His hedge fund skills were being put to a new use, maximizing the impact of every dollar donated to the now public Desert Hope Initiative. We could also look into partnering with local businesses for additional support. I've been in talks with a few companies that have shown interest. The change in Derek over the past months had been remarkable. The man who had once been solely focused on accumulating wealth now spoke passionately about social responsibility and sustainable philanthropy. It hadn't been an easy transition. There had been arguments, moments of doubt, and a steep learning curve for both of them. But watching him now, fully engaged in this new mission, Claire felt a renewed sense of connection to her husband. The door burst open, and Madison strode in, waving a newspaper. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Have you seen this? The Senate's Healthcare Committee is citing our work as a model for rural medical access reform." A ripple of excitement went through the room. Claire took the paper, scanning the article with growing amazement. Seeing the Desert Hope Initiative mentioned in discussions of national policy was both thrilling and surreal. "This is incredible," she breathed. "It's really happening. We're making a difference on a systemic level." Derek squeezed her shoulder, his voice warm with pride. "You made this happen, Claire. Your vision, your dedication." Claire shook her head, looking around at the team they'd assembled. "We all made this happen. Every one of us." The doorbell rang, and moments later, Dr. Sarah Chen was ushered in. Claire's former mentor, now a key advisor to the initiative, was slightly out of breath as she joined them. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting down her briefcase. "The Yale Medical School board meeting ran long. They're very interested in partnering with us on a rural medicine program." This news was met with another round of excitement. The idea of training the next generation of doctors to focus on underserved communities had been a dream of Claire's from the beginning. As the group dove into discussion about the potential partnership, Claire found herself stepping back, taking in the scene before her. The room was filled with energy, ideas flying back and forth. Everyone united in a common purpose. It was a far cry from the stilted dinner parties that had once been the norm in this house. Her gaze fell on a framed photo on the sideboard, a picture of her mother, taken years ago in Montana. Claire had put it there as a reminder of why she had started this journey. Now, looking at her mother's smiling face, she felt a sense of peace. "We're doing it, Mom," she whispered. "We're making a difference." The day wore on, filled with planning sessions, video calls with clinic directors, and strategy meetings. As evening fell, the team began to disperse, leaving with action items and renewed determination. Finally, only Claire and Derek remained, surveying the remnants of their productive day. Maps and reports were scattered across every surface. Coffee cups left half empty. The whiteboard covered in scribbled ideas and flowcharts. "Ah, quite a change from our usual dinner parties," Derek remarked, a hint of wry humor in his voice. Claire laughed softly. "Just a bit. Do you miss it? The old life?" Derek was quiet for a moment, considering. "Parts of it, sometimes," he admitted. "The simplicity. Maybe. Knowing exactly what was expected." He turned to her, his expression serious. "But this is so much more fulfilling. I never realized how empty it all was until we started doing something that really mattered." Claire felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so glad you're on this journey with me," she said softly. "I couldn't do this without you." Derek pulled her into an embrace. "You could," he murmured into her hair. "But I'm damn glad I get to be part of it." Eliwad, later that evening, as they walked along their beach in the fading light, Derek took Claire's hand. "I owe you an apology," he said softly. "For so many things." Claire squeezed his hand. "We've both changed," she replied. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." They stopped, looking out over the darkening Atlantic. The first stars were beginning to appear, twinkling against the deepening blue of the sky. In the distance, the lights of a passing ship blinked steadily. "What do you think the next 6 months will bring?" Derek asked. Claire considered for a moment. "More challenges, probably, but also more opportunities to help, to grow. She turned to him, a smile playing at her lips. Maybe it's time we thought about expanding beyond the Southwest. There are plenty of underserved communities right here on the East Coast. Derek's eyebrows shot up. Always thinking big, aren't you? But his tone was admiring. All right, Dr. Thompson. Let's dream even bigger. Why stop at the East Coast? Why not think globally? As they continued their walk, ideas flowing. Between them, Claire felt a sense of excitement building. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential obstacles and setbacks, but it was also brimming with possibility. The cool sand beneath their feet and the rhythmic sound of the waves served as a reminder of the constant change that was a part of life. Just as the tide shaped the shoreline, their actions were reshaping the landscape of healthcare access in America. As they turned back towards the house, now glowing warmly in the twilight, Claire felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the opportunities she'd been given, for the courage to pursue her dreams, and for the partner who now stood beside her, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The facade of their old life had crumbled away entirely, replaced by something far more genuine and fulfilling. Together, they were writing a new story, not just for themselves, but for countless others whose lives would be touched by their work. As they climbed the steps to their home, Claire paused for a moment, looking back at the ocean. The vastness of it, stretching out to the horizon, seemed to mirror the endless possibilities that lay before them. With a smile, she turned and followed Derek inside, ready to face whatever the future might bring. 1 year to the day after the Easter revelation, the Thompsons' garden was once again filled with guests. But this gathering was markedly different from the society parties of the past. The air buzzed with energy and purpose, a far cry from the stilted small talk and social posturing that had once dominated these events. Doctors from the Desert Hope clinics mingled with Boston's elite, sharing stories of lives changed and communities transformed. Yale medical students eagerly discussed rural rotations with seasoned practitioners, their eyes alight with the possibility of making a real difference. Senator Amelia Hartwell, chair of the Healthcare Committee, was deep in conversation with Richard Prescott about corporate responsibility in underserved areas. Claire, dressed simply but elegantly in a flowing sundress, moved through the crowd. Her face was alight with purpose, her step confident. Gone was the carefully constructed facade of the society wife. In its place stood a woman fully embracing her role as a healthcare advocate and philanthropist. She paused by a blossoming cherry tree, its delicate pink petals a reminder of the new life and hope that spring brought. Her fingers reached for the small gold locket around her neck, her mother's locket, now a talisman of strength and a connection to her roots. "She would be so proud of you," Derek said, coming to stand beside her. He looked different, too. The sharp edges of the cutthroat businessman softened by a year of purposeful work. "Your mother," Claire smiled, a hint of tears in her eyes. "She always said that true wealth isn't about money. It's about what you do for others." Derek nodded, his arms slipping around her waist. "She was a wise woman. I wish I could have known her." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the diverse group of people mingling in their garden. Medical professionals in sensible shoes chatted with politicians in bespoke suits. Community organizers from rural Arizona shared stories with CEOs of major corporations. It was a visual representation of the bridges they'd been building over the past year. Madison approached, notebook in hand. "The documentary crew is all set up," she said. "Are you ready for your interview, Claire?" Claire took a deep breath, nodding. The documentary about the Desert Hope Initiative had been Madison's idea, a way to share their story and inspire others to take action. It was daunting to be so publicly vulnerable, but Claire knew it was an important part of their mission. As she made her way to the area set up for filming, Claire caught snippets of conversations around her. The mobile clinic program in New Mexico has been a game changer, one doctor was saying. Hey, we're reaching people who haven't had access to healthcare in years. I never thought I'd say this, a Wall Street executive admitted to his colleague. But working with the initiative has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It's changed my whole perspective on what success really means. Claire settled into the chair facing the camera, smoothing her dress. The interviewer, a respected journalist known for her thoughtful reporting on social issues, gave her an encouraging smile. To Dr. Thompson, she began, a year ago, you were known primarily as a society wife. Today, you're being hailed as a healthcare revolutionary. Can you tell us about that journey? Claire took a moment to gather her thoughts, her hand unconsciously going to her mother's locket. It's been a journey of rediscovery, really, she said, of remembering who I am and what truly matters. She spoke of her childhood in Montana, of watching her mother struggle with inadequate health care. She shared the challenges of her years at Yale, working multiple jobs while pursuing her medical degree. And she talked about the moment she decided to use her position and resources to make a real difference. The Desert Hope Initiative isn't just about providing health care, Claire explained, her voice passionate. It's about restoring dignity. It's about showing people that they matter, that their lives and their health are important. As the interview continued, Claire found herself opening up in ways she never had before publicly. She spoke of the initial secrecy, the fear of judgment, and the ultimate liberation that came with embracing her true purpose. It hasn't always been easy, she admitted. There have been setbacks, criticism, moments of doubt. But every time we receive a letter from someone whose life has been changed by one of our clinics, every time I see a child receive the care they desperately need, I know that this is exactly what I'm meant to be doing. The interviewer nodded, clearly moved. And what would you say to others who might be inspired by your example? People who have the resources to make a difference, but don't know where to start. Claire's response was immediate and heartfelt. Start where you are, with what you have. You don't need millions of dollars to make a difference. Sometimes, it's as simple as looking around your own community and asking, what's needed here? How can I help? And then taking that first step, no matter how small it might seem. As the interview wrapped up, Claire rejoined the party. She found Derek deep in conversation with a group of business leaders, discussing ways to integrate social responsibility into corporate structures. It's not just about donations, he was saying, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had undergone a profound change. It's about reimagining the very purpose of business. What if we measured success not just in profits, but in lives improved? Claire felt a surge of pride and love for her husband. The journey hadn't been easy for either of them, but they had emerged stronger, more united in purpose than ever before. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Claire addressed the assembled guests. She spoke of challenges overcome, of lives changed, and of the work still to be done. But most of all, she spoke of hope. The kind of hope that can transform not just individuals, but entire communities. A year ago, I stood in this very garden, hiding behind a carefully constructed image, she said. Today, I stand before you as my true self, a doctor, a philanthropist, and a woman committed to creating change. But I'm also standing here as part of something much bigger than myself. Each of you, in your own way, is part of this mission. Together, we are rewriting the story of healthcare in America. The gentle Atlantic breeze carried her words across the garden, a promise of new beginnings and the enduring power of compassion in action. As Claire looked out at the faces of those gathered, colleagues, supporters, and friends, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. The facade had long since crumbled away, revealing something far more beautiful and meaningful in its place. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Claire Thompson stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The journey was far from over, but with each life touched, each community transformed, they were one step closer to realizing the dream of healthcare for all. The cherry blossoms continued to fall gently around them, a reminder of the constant renewal and hope that spring brings. And in that moment, surrounded by people united in a common cause, Claire knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would continue to unfold, touching lives and inspiring change for years to come. What did you think of the story? Leave a comment and a review about this story. If you were moved and enjoyed our work, feel free to help us continue producing. I invite you to click on our link in the first pinned comment. Now, 2 buttons will appear, one to subscribe, if you haven't already, and the other to watch other interesting stories. Choose one. Thank you for watching this far. See you soon.